Welcome to the Magic in the Cloud podcast, where exceptional visionaries reveal the personal journeys behind their remarkable success. This is a conversation with leaders who've transformed industries by navigating pivotal moments, making bold decisions, and cultivating extraordinary teams. We explore the turning points that define their careers, those instances where intuition met strategy and everything changed. It's an intimate look at the leadership philosophies that drive revolutionary outcomes, with cloud solutions as the quiet enabler. Here are your hosts, Joseph Griffith and Ryan Golombeski.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Magic in the Cloud. Today, my guest, he's a tech leader who believes AI should strengthen human relationships, not replace them. I mean, how cool is that? He recently launched a groundbreaking platform that brings intelligence directly into conversations, helping teams align and act in real time. He's a visionary entrepreneur who blends innovation, creativity, and a passion for meaningful connections. With that, everybody, please welcome my guest, Ralph Schonenbach. Ralph, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.
For so long, wanted to have you on the show, and you've been so busy doing cool things, writing books and building cool software and making relationships better. I was glad I could track you down. When you think about the future of work, Ralph, what inspired you to create an AI teammate that focuses on relationships rather than just data? And how do you see that changing the way people connect?
It's a great question, and one that I'm still solving for. It's if we think back to when we went digital with our networks, and this for me was around the time that LinkedIn started to build a presence. And if you think also when technologies like Skype came out, where we could actually communicate once we left a person, this is when I really started to get passionate about relationships, because for the first time we could connect and stay connected. Because that was always the challenge before technology, was that, if you moved, we would have to write each other a letter, or we would just lose touch over time. And now that we are connected online, the challenge today is, how do we make the most out of all the relationships that we have around us? And we're connected to so many different people in different platforms and different environments that it's becoming more and more challenging. So I was writing the book Relationships Matter, and I was really trying to think of what technology could I recommend to people to use to help get more value out of their relationships, and not just business value, but just personal value as well. And I couldn't think of a solution. And so started to really think about what we can do with the technology that we have. And technology itself has evolved so fast over the past couple of years that we can do things that we didn't think we could do before. So the idea to create a platform to help us navigate these relationships and have more effective conversations really was the genesis of Meerkat. And now we're building that. We've got a great team. It's a lot of fun, and it's really cool to see how technology is helping us as a team, and then to start to see, as more and more people use that, the benefits that can come out of it.
So Ralph, we were talking about with Meerkat deploying it internally so that you guys could work on your own relationships, leveraging the platform, the technology. And I think we were at a place where we were going to give an example or two.
So we've been building the platform since the beginning of January, and as a team, we've been dreaming about what this could actually do. And now that we have it, we're starting to use it, and we're really seeing benefits out of that. And one of the basic things that it does is that it brings the AI intelligence into the conversation. So there's many times when you have a question, you can't answer it. So then you either make a note to bring that to the next meeting, or you go research it during the call, or you just forget it. And Meerkat actually joins calls. And so you can ask it questions in the call, and it will bring back that information. And it also has an overview of your relationships so that it can answer questions like, who do we know in common, or who do we know at a certain company? And then it has the AI intelligence also in the chat platform of Meerkat, so that if we're chatting back and forth and we're missing something, we can just ask Meerkat. And I find that there's so many questions that I actually ask during a conversation and get answers to that I normally would just say, I don't know, and then you just move on. So I learn a lot more from having it in the conversation, and it also speeds up the amount of time that we need to finish a task because we have everything we need right there at the moment. So that's how we're benefiting from it using it today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Talk to us a little bit about what fascinates. Well, first of all, what you're doing and why you're doing it is amazing. But if you could, there's something interesting about your branding, and hopefully, I think you said you might have a picture that you could share with us. Talk to us a little bit about what went into your branding as you share that screen.
Yeah, it was really when we were thinking about what is this app, we were thinking about, maybe we call it like a relationship navigator or, something technical came, ideas kept coming to our mind. And if you think of the different apps that are out there, they're very cold feeling. It feels more like it's a machine. And so we're like, well, maybe there's an animal that could represent us. And so we started looking for animals that represent relationships and community. And we found meerkats, and they're very communal. They have a social hierarchy. They look out for each other. And we thought, oh, this is, perfect for what we're doing. And they're also very cute. So it's really fun to use them as our marketing face. And so we've been building a lot of cool content with it and getting good feedback. And I can just show you, what our website looks like just to bring that to life.
That would be great. I'd appreciate that. And I know our guests would.
Yeah. So we've got this little meerkat guy here. And so we've been able to, use AI to help tell our story with these characters. And this is what I was mentioning about having AI in the conversation. So while you're having a call, you can ask questions in a video call, and then you can also bring it into the app and track actions that come out of that call. And it also has an overview of the relationship graph. But it's also this idea of persistent recall is really interesting because, we have so many discussions, and, if Joe, you have tons of calls, and if you have 5 calls a day and you just extend that over a month, that's so many discussions. And how do you keep track of all of that? And Meerkat has that persistent recall across all your conversations. So I think there's just something there that is really exciting.
So Ralph, thanks for sharing all that. There are a couple of tools that come to mind that most of us use, one or the other, or many of them, that I want to talk about and have you compare and contrast them. Not so much from like a competitive perspective, like why is Meerkat better, but I think people are just getting to a point where they understand how those tools can be of value, like a Fireflies or a ChatGPT or a Teams. If you could talk about how Meerkat makes it easier or more reliable than those, that'd be great. And then the second thing you touched on, which I think is really, really important, which is most people are getting messaging that AI is going to take over their job, that you should be afraid of it, that's going to learn too much about you and take advantage of you, things like that. But if you could comment a little bit about your own point of view around how AI is helpful and you should embrace it, I know my guests would certainly appreciate that.
Those are great questions, and the latter is really at the forefront of most discussions today. If we look at Meerkat, and we actually as a team struggled about what are we building, because when you're building something new, it's not that you can say it is the next best whatever if that thing didn't exist before. And if we think of conversations as a process, and I'm a consultant at heart, so I always think of different steps. The conversation process is very fragmented. So we'll have a call here, the call will end, you'll get your notes, those go somewhere, then we'll go off to email, and then we might message each other, and then we'll jump back on a call, and whatever we talked about is kind of gone. And so like that's a lot of knowledge that just disappears. And what we've done with our thinking is how do we embed our technology across the entire process so that when the call ends, it doesn't end the conversation, it just picks up in the chat, and the chat has memory of the conversation. And when we jump back on a call, the app has memory of all of our discussions across chat and video. So this, I think, is what differentiates us. We're not part of that process, we are the entire process. So that's exciting. And just, as we use it, we're like, oh, wow, I never even thought about that. That's really helpful. So that's, how we're positioning ourselves. And the question on AI and will it replace people? Of course, there's ways that AI is replacing different functions and different jobs. I think that's inevitable. What impact will it have on society? I think, we'll have to see how that plays out. I mean, you can go both directions and my mind does think through both sides of it. But what I find today is that AI enables me to do so much more. It helps me be a better me. And I probably get, 20, 25 hours of productivity out of my now 6-7 hour day. Whereas before I wouldn't even be able to take on new projects because I wouldn't have the capacity to do that. So that's how I'm seeing AI today as, enabling us to do more with the talents that we have. Where will it end? I don't know. Every day I wake up and I see new things that come out and I'm like, oh, that's incredible. I never even thought about that. I'm like, well, what's going to be left? Maybe there won't be a role for any app creators in the world because they'll just pop up. But right now I'm optimistic.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective on that. I think for me personally, it's I think my first iteration of AI is you have this really smart apprentice intern that works for you. That's probably smarter than me, faster than me, arguably more creative than me, maybe even more organized than me, but very immature. Right. So it's that you need to know that, hey, my responsibility is to mature my intern, not compete with my intern. That was number one. And then number two is a few years ago, before AI hit the scene, I just went through a process where I really focused on time and time management, those kind of things. And I started to get like, oh, a week is really long, and a day is really long, and an hour is really long. I got it down to, holy smokes, a minute is really long. You can get a lot done in a minute. And what happened is AI made me more curious because I'm like, well, in this 5 minutes that I have, I could, in the old method, maybe get one thing researched using my curiosity, just to say the curiosity side of things. But with AI, I might be able to get 2 or 3 things researched. And some people say, well, that makes you lazy. I'm like, no, it enhances my curiosity. It's almost like, oh, I want to go to the library and look that up. You don't need to. It's right at your iPad. Right. So you're motivated to me, it motivates you to be more curious. So thanks for sharing a lot of what's behind the scenes as to why you guys are doing this. If someone who's listening says, well, I think this would really fit like my company, what would these people say to executives and leaders on their teams to make it a really good decision to invest in talking to you and your team? What kind of things do executives want to hear?
We're focusing now on smaller teams, so we're not looking at an enterprise play. There's a lot of competition. The compliance topics are really challenging to get around, and we're just looking to prove out this. So we're working with entrepreneurial teams, small companies. We've got some university use cases that we're working on, and it's really about how do we have more effective communications, but also how do we leverage those networks around us. And just to give a really simple point is that, if you and I wanted to figure out who do we know in common, that's fairly easy because we can go to LinkedIn and we can see who our mutual connections are. But if we've got 3 people on a call and we want to know who do we know in common, it's virtually impossible because there is no tech that does that unless you throw it into CRM or Excel, and nobody's going to do that. But there's a lot of value of knowing who you know in common because that builds trust. If you all know the same person and you all have a similar relationship with that person, that increases the ability to have a richer conversation. And that's a simple example. But then if you think about, any variety of conversations, like where do we have a combination of people in a certain company, or who could introduce us to a certain person, and your network becomes fluid and you can engage with it. That's I would say the magic of what Meerkat is doing. So it's really anyone that wants to get more out of the relationships that they have around them and appreciates efficiency. That's who I would say we're targeting today.
And Ralph, is this a concept, correct me if I'm wrong, is this a concept that we would call network mapping?
Yes, I would say to me, it's almost like the ability to talk to your network, to have a conversation with someone that is able to navigate that quickly. And, if you think of CRM today, it's very static. There's stuff in there. People don't use it a lot. If you think of LinkedIn, and I love LinkedIn, but it's not really useful when you try to figure out how to navigate networks, especially as your teams grow, or if you want to plug and play people into that network. It's very difficult because you've got an enterprise plan with most applications, and it's very difficult to get the valuable people that are outside your moat into that application. And that's what Meerkat is breaking down that barrier.
Yeah, that's really cool. Hey, one other question about Meerkat. What if any crazy use cases have you come across? Anything yet that really, really surprised you?
Yeah, it's I'm trying to like push it as much as I can just to see like what comes out of it. There's just a really simple one. It's just actions. So like you can just tell Meerkat to create an action for you, and it will create it for you. So like I'll be walking, I'll be like, oh, I need to call Joe tomorrow. Meerkat, create an action for me. And you can do voice to text, and it creates an action for me. And I'm sure that there are apps out there that do that, but I found that that's so cool because I just use paper all the time. And like, I've got like this stack of paper, and my weekend project is to clean up all my notes and like get organized. And now I can use Meerkat to help me just organize my day. And that's just a little tiny example, but it's one that's actually really helping me.
Yeah, and someone just reminded me, and I'm going to forget the author's name. This was a conversation yesterday. There's a guy that wrote a book, it escapes me, but it was a productivity master. And the book is like 13, 15 years old now, right? And I got it as an audiobook and I didn't listen to it. But your example, right? Like time management using calendars. It was only 10 years ago that sticky notes and handwritten notes were the way to go. And I remember the shift from that to trusting Google Calendar or Teams Calendar to put things, saying my whole life is there. And you think about today, like you said, it may not be a crazy use case, but now what you're saying is I don't have to manually go in and enter these things into Google. I can just get my assistant, which somehow, is going to be tied back to all these things, and say, hey, create this task, check on this meeting for me. That's just incredible, dude. Like, we just get back to, I don't know. I see it as not only a productive thing, but I mentioned earlier, if you have more time in your day to be productive, you do have more time in your day to be creative. You do have more time to be a better listener. You do have more time to say, hey, you know what? I got all my stuff done. Maybe I can spend an extra hour with my family instead of, I'm ahead of schedule, right? So I think a lot of those result in like trickle down benefits for us. So I really appreciate that. Before we get to know you a little bit personally, did I miss anything, or is anything else you'd like to share about what you're doing, why you're doing it?
Yeah, I was just thinking, so Meerkat will also connect with your email and your calendar. And, today our email and calendar is like a black box, basically. I mean, we have it there. And if you file all your emails away, then your inbox is clean, but your overall to-dos are not. And, we lose track of things because, if I send you a note to, send me information, I forgot that I sent you a note. I'm not making a note to follow up with you because it's out of my inbox. And if you look at your calendar, if I had a meeting with you 6 months ago and I didn't have a meeting with you since then, something happened. Either there was nothing or I forgot to follow up with you. Right. And so by connecting all these different things together, Meerkat can come back and say, hey, Ralph, you sent Joe a note 2 weeks ago. He didn't respond to that. And that's going to be really helpful to me because, for me, my goal is to get my inbox clean. So if it's out of my inbox, my project's done, but that's not really the end of it. The end is when you respond back to me. That's what I'm trying to get from all my effort, is a response back. But if I don't have anything to help me remember who's supposed to respond to me, then it's just gone. And same with my calendar. If I have 30 meetings a week and I do, 120 over a month, then over time, there are things that fall off. I might have an exciting conversation and then 2 days later, it's just out of mind, and that's a missed opportunity. And so being able to have Meerkat in my day across my different applications, and the ability for it to tell me, hey, these are the 5 people you need to follow up with because of these different reasons. Yeah. I'm going to get a lot of value out of that, and I'm not going to miss opportunities.
I really appreciate you sharing that. Thanks so much for sharing with us what you're doing with Meerkat. I'd like to talk a little bit about you. Tell me, where were you born? Tell me about your family. Tell me about your upbringing. What about all that shaped your perspective on relationships?
Yeah, that's a big question. So I grew up in Wyoming, and it's a beautiful place. But growing up, I was so excited to get out of there, and just experience the world. And it was a different time. We didn't have internet, so you didn't get exposure to what was happening in the world. And in Wyoming, it's a really slow pace. I mean, you watch the cows eating grass, and that's entertainment. So getting out of there was important. So I went to school in Baltimore. I studied at Goucher College, and that was a really nice small community for me because it had like 900 students. And so I really felt at home there. And even getting into Goucher, I had really people from my network that helped make that happen. And that's where I started to appreciate that people can help you get where you're going. And if you invest time in those relationships get stronger. And when I moved to New York, it was a really scary experience because, the city is really big. And, I was coming from this, little Wyoming place with, no idea of how companies work. And I remember in my job interview, they were asking, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I'm like, I don't even know where I see myself after this interview, so, things changed. And then, I was working a lot, and I just felt like my liberal arts education was not really being put to use. I would meet with my friends out of work, and all I could think about were spreadsheets and PowerPoints and things. And I'm like, this isn't why I studied. And so I moved to Europe, and I spent about 20 years in Europe. And that was a great experience because, it was in 99, and you saw like how technology, impacted the world there, and how relationships, you're building an entirely new network. And then when I moved back to the States, it was, how do I rebuild my network because it got old after 20 years. So now you have to build all these fresh relationships. So relationships have always been part of what I've been doing. And that's what inspired me also to write the book, was just, to help me organize my thoughts, because that, if I can see it on paper, that helps. And maybe some people could benefit from, my learnings as well.
And tell me a little bit about the book. You hinted at it. It's Relationships Matter. You can find it on Amazon. But talk to us a little bit more about what you'd like to offer in the book.
Yeah, it was really, everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people think, I'd like to write a book. And today it's really easy to write a book in theory because you can just ask one of the apps to write it for you. But this was kind of like in the beginning of those apps, so it couldn't actually do that. And they don't really have the stories. I mean, the stories is what brings a book to life. And I was really like, what type of book is this? Is it more business? Is it more personal? Is it a mix of both? And I did land on a mix of both. And, when I first started, I'd write like, 10, 20 pages. And I'm like, okay, well, this is okay. This is going. But then I got really into it, and I was in India working on it, and it was so cool because I would go to breakfast and I'd have like my stack of papers and I'd be working on it, and like the people that were working there, they're like, "How's it going?" And they were like, cheering me on to continue with it. And I would be like, have all my papers spread out so I could see like the whole story and everything. And I just became obsessed with it to the point where, like, after a couple of months, I'm like, okay, this has to end, or it never will. And so I'm like, let's just wrap it up. And I did, and it was great. I sometimes like think about writing another book, but then it's a very time-consuming process, and it's almost all-encompassing. So it's very hard to do that on the side. So I don't think it fits into my schedule for the next one yet, but it's in the background.
Well, and you should be, you're proud. I mean, to your point, you finished it, right? And I think what I hear a lot these days is that we all want business strategy. We all want home strategy, how to finance this at home, how to build this at work. I mean, there's a lot of great books out there on how to do things that are centered around personal or business success. But I do think we often forget about the relationship piece. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. I think she created that movement. For me personally, the whole vulnerability thing, I think I've shared this with you before. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And if you said, I'm number one, I sell the most, and I do it because I'm vulnerable and transparent, people would laugh you out of the room, right? You just had to say, I'm number one, I sell the most, and I have no friends, and I kick everybody's ass. I'm like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, that's not really how I do it. So I actually was afraid to acknowledge how important relationships were to me, even though I knew they were the key to my success, because I'm not the fastest, I'm not the smartest, whatever. So I think you really did it's a wonderful thing. I would encourage my guests to read it. And the other thing you just reminded me of is next week I have to speak to, I think, 2 classes of 20 or 25 kids in college, right? And they all think I'm going to walk in with, 8 business strategies, like your LinkedIn profile and all that stuff. And believe it or not, most of my presentation is every conversation matters. Multi-threaded conversations. You go in expecting you're going to talk about work. you talk about religion. You think you're going to go talk about giving more money at church, you wind up getting a book on linear versus residual income. And things like, in the end of the day, getting a job, right? The only KPI around getting a job that matters is the number of people you talk to who could hire you, right? So relationships do matter. And I think that if folks from this, they should feel really good and say, hey, it may not be the fastest or the most skilled, but if I really work on my relationships, that is a way towards personal growth, business growth, those things.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I think that we're the risk is that we think we're connected, but we're not, and we feel like we have relationships all around us, and we feel like we're engaging, but those relationships are not getting stronger. And if you think about social media, you scroll through Instagram, you see all this stuff around you, you feel like you're connected. If I think of LinkedIn, I see all the activity of people in my network. But I can have a call with a person and they don't even realize that I changed the job 2 years ago, and you just assume that people do because of course you told everyone on LinkedIn that you changed your job. But relationships, I think, do matter, and having the conversations like we're having or meeting in person, makes those relationships real. And I think that that's where, AI is not going to be able to replace genuine relationships. I mean, of course, you can have AI friends, and we'll see where that leads to. But when you get to the point where you see each other and you shake hands, or you pat each other on the back, or you have a drink together, that is real, and that's really important. And I think that we're going to get to a point where we're going to want more of those experiences because we're going to get tired of being online all the time. And so I hope that we get there sooner rather than later.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Hey, outside of work, so outside of relationship, writing a book, and outside of working on a new tech platform and dealing with spreadsheets and PowerPoints, what do you like to do outside of work?
I love to travel. So I travel a lot. So every month I'm somewhere, and it's either in the US or Europe. And we have our team is in India, so I love going there. And anytime I can visit a new country on the way, I get super excited about that. I love spending time with my family. I have 3 children, and they're starting to get into university, and it's great to see them become young adults and have their friends and their relationships. And so I enjoy that. And I get a lot of value out of being in nature, especially alone, because I think that what I find, I don't know about you, but the speed of everything makes my thinking, it makes it harder for me to think longer thoughts. So if I just shut down everything and I try to concentrate on one thing without multitasking all the time, that's getting harder and harder for me. And it makes me nervous because creativity, you need to think longer. And so I try to take pauses and actually read physical books, and not just like one page, but like focus on reading a chapter so that I have to concentrate on something. Or I go on a hike and I don't bring anything digital with me, so that during those 1 hour, 2 hour periods, I'm free with myself. And I think that we really need to focus on that, because I think that technology is just making us bounce around too much. I have one agent running, and I jump over to PowerPoint, and then my email bings, and then I get a phone call, and then I'm back over here, and we get used to working like that. But I don't know if that chaos is so good for creativity.
I'd like to validate your point. Earlier, I mentioned that I did some really focused research and paying attention to my own time management, and I got it down to 1 minute is really long. That was such a in my younger years, I didn't even consider what a minute was, right? The good news is I get a lot more done. The bad news is, man, I get worn out. And I do think it's important for people to appreciate that. I always say I've never slowed down so much in my life and been more productive. So that may sound like 2 different sides of the stick here, right? Like, wow, a minute is really long, but I've slowed down and been more productive. That is absolutely true. And I would contend you nailed the secret sauce, which is you run like hell, but then you have to find time just about every day to slow down. For me personally, the as an overthinker, right? So let's come up with 10 ways to slow down. And someone's like, dude, go outside, sit on your front porch with a bottle of water by yourself. The number one thing that happens to people when they get overworked is they get dehydrated. Like, what? And they're like, yeah, So whenever I find myself like, all right, I'm fried. Sometimes I take a nap, to be honest with you. But really, if I go outside for 5 minutes, man, like you said, intentionally for 5 or 15, not one, and slow down. You know what happens in the first minute or so? You're like, I should go back inside. I have to write that email. Right. But if you get past that 2, 3 minutes, it's almost like fasting, right? You get past those first hunger pangs, they go away, and then you're off to the races. You nailed it, Ralph. To me, that is the secret sauce. Talk to me about people who influenced your career and one or two people that influenced your career or your upbringing.
Yeah, I've always had really good mentors, even growing up. I was fortunate to be connected with a U.S. senator when I was going to college, and so I used to go to DC and see how he worked, and it was amazing. And he was a bridge builder between the parties, and it was great to see that the parties actually worked together, and that really helped me build up my self-esteem, because growing up in Wyoming, you feel like you're a nobody because you are, basically. And, so you move into the big city and you're like, how do I keep up with this? And it's a whole different environment. So, I connected to people at work that really helped me along the way. And when I worked at Anderson, when I moved to New York, I had a really great group of people that really helped me grow. And so I've just been fortunate to find people that have helped me along the way. And I think that part of that is just being open to wanting help and recognizing that you need help. And, if you have a network, or if you're building a network, there's people out there that can really step in. And that made a huge difference for me.
Mm. And this person that was a senator, obviously he or she must not be in Congress now because they're not talking. But curious if you've had an opportunity to tell this person thank you for that impact.
I have, and unfortunately, he passed away.
Sorry to hear, man.
Yeah. So he was a remarkable person, and I stayed in touch with him for a long time. I have all the letters that we wrote back and forth to each other, and
nice.
My kids have met him, and it was just such a great experience to have that
another
person.
Lesson. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. Sorry.
No, that was good.
I think it's something I stress all the time with people, that you should take a few minutes to tell people that you appreciate them. And there's a customer of mine that about 3 years ago, $1 million a year, big customer. And he says, I appreciate you, Joey G, at the end of a call on a Friday. And his name was Seth. And I said, did you just say that you appreciate me? And he looked and he said, or he was on a Zoom call. He said, I've said it to you for the last 6 months, every other Friday when we talk. I said, I think it's the first time I ever heard it, right? I went around and now I do all the time. I tell people, if you mean it, say it. And people, if you mean it, people can't not smile, right? So, go to places like the gym where all the tough guys are in there, and you go, yeah, Ralph, I appreciate you. And you watch these tough gym guys melt. Like, oh, thanks, man, So I think it's really, really important to let people know. And then one personal experience called my calc teacher, who just, I finished number 1 in math. It's one of my woo-hoo. And I called him, probably 5-8 years ago. And I said, his name is Mr. Carfagno. And I just said, hey, Joe Griffith, I'm sure you don't remember me. Of course he says, 1978, front row 3, you were this guy. I'm like, holy shit, this guy remembered me. And I said, Mr. Carfagno, I just wanted to say thank you for what you did. Like, I use your advice all the time. He passed away 2 years later. Right? And I'm like, you know what, man, I am so glad I had a chance to share that story with him, how much of a difference he made. So thanks for sharing your senator story with us. Ralph, this is awesome, man. I always enjoy talking to you. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I can't tell you how much I appreciate how important making relationships better, how important it is to you and to your team. And we need more people like you out there. How can people reach you? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, it's easy. If you just go to try meerkat.ai, there's a way to reach out and connect. And I always love meeting new people, so very open to connecting to whoever reaches out.
And Ralph, just I'm sure I misheard. Try Meerkat.
Yes. Yeah.
Try TRY meerkat.com.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Ralph. I'm sure our listeners are going to love this conversation. For everyone, this brings us to the end of another episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate it. Thanks. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Magic in the Cloud podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.